Following cuts to some aid and direct checks to Americans, the Senate has voted in favor of passing the coronavirus relief bill based on party lines, of course. The altered legislation now heads over to the House of Representatives for approval before getting signed by Joe Biden. That could all happen in the next few days. Now, there are some differences between what the Senate passed versus what the House had passed earlier. And I wanted to give you some of those differences right now. The Senate version of the bill does implement more means testing. For instance, under the House bill, the cash payment would phase out for singles with incomes between $75,000 and $100,000, and married couples between $150,000 and $200,000. But under the Senate bill, the phase out stops at $80,000 for singles and $160,000 for married couples. Now, that's important context because some were under the impression that after moderate Democrats succeeded in stripping out the $15 an hour minimum wage hike in the Senate version of the bill, then moderates, or I should just say conservative Democrats like Manchin and Sinema would back off when it comes to some of the other concessions they were looking for. It appears that was not the case, and the means testing will be a little more intense than necessary when it comes to the direct checks to Americans. Already, the Biden administration had cut down the amount that they were willing to provide from $2,000 to $1,400, and now it'll be more targeted. And this means that there are millions of Americans who did qualify for the direct checks who now will not qualify. About 5 million Americans will not qualify for the checks when they did in fact received the checks under the Trump administration. And keep in mind that we're talking about Democrats debating amongst themselves within the Senate, which makes this thing so frustrating. But to be sure, there are positive elements to this legislation as well, which we'll get to in just a second. And I apologize, I also want to clarify that roughly 8 million, not 5, roughly 8 million fewer households will get a check under the Senate bill compared with what the House passed, and that's according to analysis from the Tax Policy Center. So there's more, Cenk, that I want to share, but what are your thoughts on this move toward more means testing and also cutting the amount of money for the unemployment insurance benefits from $400 a week to $300 a week?
Yeah, so first let me explain that detail and then I'll give you broad strokes here. So the reason why they made the deal to cut it from $400 to $300, but add the provision that you can now deduct the unemployment benefits from your taxes. You don't have to pay taxes on them. That is not to help the deficit. That's initially what they said, but that makes no sense because it actually did not change those numbers at all. The reason they did it was because the Chamber of Commerce said, I need you to drive everybody back to the mines, right? So basically, the Chamber of Commerce does not mind. That's the business community, the corporations that run our government. They do not mind the government giving away a lot of money to individuals because they think, well, we barely pay any taxes. Like Amazon pays $0 in taxes. Apple often pays $0 in taxes. So they're like, it's basically certain number of citizens financing other citizens. And then those citizens are more likely to spend money on our corporations. We're okay with that. But if you give them a lot of unemployment insurance, or what they perceive to be a lot of unemployment insurance, that's gonna mess with them coming back to work because we pay them nearly slave wages. So the minute you pay them anything above slave wages, they might not come back to work as quickly. So don't do that. Now, we could have fixed all this, not going through unemployment tax credits, et cetera, but actually just raising their wages. But that is the thing that corporations hate the most. Keep the wages low so we can maximize profit. If you're gonna funnel government help to them in other ways, we don't mind because that's not our money, that's your money that's just getting passed around. That's why they did that provision in that funky way, because if you're a normal, logical person, you would think, why? Why mess around with that at all? Why do this incredibly convoluted way instead of the more straightforward way? And that's because corporations are the ones that control politicians and they do not want higher wages. They took out almost everything that would have touched higher wages in one way or another. So which then brings us back to the general point. Look, are there great provisions in this bill? Yes, there definitely are, right? And it cuts poverty by a very significant amount. We'll talk about that, the child tax credit, earned income tax credit, which I've told you is great. But all those provisions were not really under question. So the reason why we emphasize the $15 minimum wage and some of this reduced payments to some families, like 8 million people being left out, is because no one disagreed on the great parts. So great, mission accomplished. We needlessly threw away some wonderful parts of this bill, honestly, be in a negotiation with Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema's donors, which are, again, the Chamber of Commerce. Also, same of the other 6 Democrats that voted against the minimum wage. They don't work for you, they work for their corporate donors. And that's why you have the convoluted formulas, and that's why you have everything touching wages being taken out of the bill.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And in regard to the various ways in which the Senate version of the bill is better than the House version of the bill, I think it's worth taking a look at how much the Senate bill would actually subsidize COBRA, which would keep employees on, or it would keep people on their employer's health insurance plan, for about 18 months, even after they've been laid off. So this is a way of kind of making up for the fact that we don't have a robust, social safety net when it comes to healthcare in this country. Biden was unwilling to unilaterally expand Medicare so it covers every single person who had been laid off, which, by the way, he does have the ability to do during a pandemic. Instead, what they're going to do is they're going to subsidize 100% of COBRA premiums, which is better than what the House proposed. The House bill temporarily subsidized 85% of the insurance premiums, which can be expensive. COBRA is notorious for being expensive. The Senate bill will include a 100% subsidy of COBRA health insurance premiums to ensure that the laid off workers can remain on their employer health plans at no cost through the end of September. So through the end of September is shorter than I would like to see, but the fact that it's subsidized 100% is certainly better than 85%. And then moving on to the expansion of the child tax credit, because I think that's the strongest element in this proposal. So it would provide $3,600 per child under the age of 6 and $3,000 per child between the ages of 6 and 17. And it would be deposited into Americans' bank accounts every quarter, right? So this is different from child tax credits as we've known them, where when someone files for taxes, a certain amount of their income won't be taxed. That's not how it's gonna work. People would literally get a deposit into their bank accounts by the Treasury Department once every quarter. And it really depends on how many children a family has and how old those children are. And that's huge. I mean, we're talking about $7,600 for a family of 4, for a typical family of 4, as long as they're not raking in a ton of money every year. So that's some positive news. And I'm glad that that portion of it was included in the Senate bill.
Yeah, so let's go back to COBRA for a second. Why gratuitously throw in more benefits for COBRA? Nobody asked for it. I'm glad they did it. That's a good development, right? Again, employers sometimes have to pay a portion of COBRA. So they tell corporate Democrats, I don't want to pay any portion of it. This will be a good way for you guys to get more relief to Americans and still, A, not hurt business interests, but B, help business interests. So that's why they're giving anything they can to help the business community in a way that is concealed as well as it could. And now, to be fair to the Biden administration, this bill helps corporations directly a lot less than the other bills, and it helps the average American way more. So the other bills were around 37% of the money went to individuals. In this bill, over half the money, 54%, goes to individuals directly. So that is a great development. So credit where credit is due. Only 4% goes to business interests, and the other bills, a huge percentage went to business interests. So that's why the business community, I think, is putting pressure on the Manchins and the Cinemas to strip out the increase in minimum wage and anything else that might affect corporate interests, because they're shocked that most of the benefit isn't going to them. I'm sure that they find that outrageous. And then finally, when it comes to poverty, partly because of the child credit, but all the different credits, earned income tax credit, et cetera, this is going to reduce it by 1/3. That's a giant number. and something to be celebrated. It will take 13 million Americans out of poverty. That's a wonderful number. And it will cut child poverty in half. That's terrific. If they just kept the other parts, today and tomorrow would have been an awesome celebration, right? The other parts of the bill are really, really good. And I don't mind them doing the things for Cobra. That's good that we get more benefits for people who are out of work. I don't mind even, look, some of the playing around with math, I could have lived with that fidgeting, right? If they just included the minimum wage, this would have been a home run of a bill. As it stands, it's there's still terrific things in there. I want you to focus on that, but I also would like, obviously, any Democrat or any progressive to ever come up with a plan to pass the $15 minimum wage, because right now they killed it in this bill and they have no such plan in any future bills. All they have is completely vague promises that right now appear to be undoable.
Yeah, all of the positive elements of this bill were overshadowed by the fact that the whole debate about what would end up in the bill really highlighted the flaws in our system, right? I mean, when it comes to the Senate as a legislative body, the fact that they have this complete arbitrary procedural rule, the fact that they have this legislative filibuster, it was just more verification, more confirmation that conservative Democrats like Joe Manchin plan to serve as an obstacle to getting robust policies passed. And yeah, I mean, like it's easy for all these smaller provisions to be overshadowed by that, in my opinion, sobering fact for a lot of people. I think people were under the assumption, because Democrats certainly campaign this way, that if you have these 2 Senate races, runoff races in Georgia go toward the Democratic candidates, well then we're gonna be able to accomplish amazing things. But again, this was a sobering moment because some of the amazing things obviously include a long overdue $15 an hour minimum wage hike, which the federal government hasn't increased since 2009. I mean, it's absolutely shameful. But it also includes additional money for homeless services, 8.5 billion more than the House version of the bill had. $510 million for homeless services. And then in regard to the and also it would fund FEMA in order to help with homeless services. And when I mentioned the 8.5 billion, it's for rural providers for COVID relief. So there's additional money to help individuals living in rural parts of the country. So there are some parts of the bill, again, that didn't get much attention, that are positive, but when it comes to the overall broken system under which these pieces of legislation get passed, I think people are trying to think about what can be done to reform it, what can be done to change it. Otherwise, we're not going to get anything done.
Yeah, and the final piece of context is when Obama took charge with yet another Republican-fueled disaster that he had to fix, the stimulus bill that they did was under $1 trillion. And this one is about $2 trillion. So at least they've learned their lesson that there was no reason to go with a lower amount. It didn't get them any more votes, and it prevented a quicker recovery, which not only cost citizens, but it cost the Democrats politically. So here they went very large, at least on the numbers, in terms of relief to get people checks right away. And that's both a good thing overall policy-wise, but honestly, it's also good for their reelection. Good. I love it. If you're gonna do things that are smart, that help you politically, but actually help the American people from a policy perspective, that's a win-win. There's nothing wrong with that. So at least they weren't knuckleheads about that. And I think when people do get those checks, it probably will make a pretty significant difference in how they perceive the Democratic Party, because normally the Democrats never deliver anything. So them actually delivering something will be a giant surprise to the American people.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.